Hello, everyone. Today on the Doctor Who Guide, I am beyond excited to be interviewing Will Hadcroft, author of Doctor Who The Resurrection Plant, an audio original adventure that came out this month from BBC Audio. It's available on CD and digital download. Links are in the description down below. And down in the description below as well, you will find a Google form for how to enter today's giveaway. Will Hadcroft has signed a copy of the Resurrection Plant CD so that we could do a giveaway today. That will only be available to people who enter who are from the US. However, if you are from anywhere else that's not the US, I am throwing in an unsigned copy of the Resurrection Plant CD for one lucky winner who I will just ship directly from Amazon that CD to you. So definitely check out that Google form and enter down below if you want a chance to win this giveaway. So without any further ado, let's get into the interview. Hello, everyone. Today on the Doctor Who Guide, I am very excited to be joined by a special guest. Today with me is Will Hadcroft, Doctor Who fan and author of Doctor Who The Resurrection Plant, now available to order. Links in the description down below. Will, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me on your channel.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. For those of you who may not know, The Resurrection Plant is an audio original adventure from BBC Audio featuring the Second Doctor, Jamie McCrimmon, and Zoe Harriet, read by Frazer Hines, who played Jamie in Doctor Who. How exciting was that to find out that Frazer Hines was narrating your story?
Very exciting, Alex. This is my first, my first official Doctor Who release of any kind. So a real dream come true, you know. The first time I saw the Second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, was in 1981. I was 10, and it was part of a season on BBC Two, the secondary channel of the BBC, and a season called The Five Faces of Doctor Who. Tom Baker had regenerated into Peter Davison that March, and the producer, John Nathan Turner, was worried that fans of my generation who'd known Tom Baker for 7 years. You know, I was 4 when Tom took it over from John Pertwee, and approaching my 11th birthday when he gave it over to Peter Davison. So John Nathan Turner was worried that fans of my generation wouldn't accept somebody else playing the Doctor. So he had this special season called The Five Faces of Doctor Who, and it was one story a week. You know, it was split up into each story was 4 episodes, wasn't it, in the old series? So you had week 1 was An Unearthly Child for William Hartnell. Week 2 was The Crotons with Patrick Troughton, Wendy Pabrian, and Frazer Hines. So that was the first time I'd seen them. And I didn't see them again until The Seeds of Death was released on VHS some years later. So that was the beginnings of me becoming aware of that team. So fast forward to this year, I'm now 52 years old, and I've got the privilege and the joy of writing for that team and Frazer Hines reading it. So it's a real dream come true and a joy.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So cool that you got to have those memories from your childhood and kind of come full circle and be able to write for this TARDIS team. It really was so enjoyable. I have left a 5-star review on Amazon, and I wanted to share it with you now just so that those watching can hear kind of my review of the story as well. I've titled the review A Refreshingly Modern Yet Authentic Adventure, narrated with charm by the talented Frazer Hines, who must be commended for a spot-on Second Doctor performance, as well as his own very own Jamie McCrimmon. This adventure is sure to please the most loyal of Second Doctor fans, as author Will Hadcroft authentically captures the voice and essence of the Second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, as well as mixing in modern elements that keep this story fresh and yet satisfyingly familiar. Each character has something to do and contribute, and the pace holds interest as the TARDIS team encounters the darker elements of the story that come from, and here I put in quotation marks, corners of the universe which have bred the most terrible things which act against everything we believe in. They must be fought. But what happens when those corners are too close to home? Listen to find out. And that's what I really did enjoy about this story, and something that I love about audios and classic stories written now is how we can tie them together with modern elements of the story. Because for Patrick Troughton's time as a Doctor, you know, regeneration wasn't even properly called regeneration. Gallifrey didn't really have a name yet. And so many things that would be developed by Robert Holmes and Terrance Dicks names that we would put to places weren't yet in place. So I love that we had familiar elements and more modern elements too, even some sound effects that were
Yeah.
tied in with a modern series that got to be used with a classic crew that were very much embodied in a very, very classic way. I have some questions from members of the Who crew, as well as my brother, Tony, who asks, how do you get into the realm of writing for audio, if that's something you're interested in? Because he has lots of, connections in the recording space, but if you want to write for audio, how do you get into that?
Well, I would say just as if you were trying to write books, and you would then write for fanzines and that kind of thing and get started that way, the audio equivalent is to write audio drama and get it produced by fans. There are a number of sort of semi-pro producers knocking around these days who are making their own Doctor Who stories, aren't there? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote one years ago in 2006, a full cast drama for a team called Fine Line Productions. And it was produced by Gareth Preston, and Joe Binks played the Doctor, and basically it's just family and friends basically. And Gareth also was very much into amateur dramatics and putting on stage plays and the like, so he was very involved in drama and theatre and so on a semi-pro basis. So I submitted a storyline to him in 2000 and whatever it was. I know it got made in 2006 in the end. And another full circle situation is that my editor on the Resurrection Plant, John Ainsworth, played the
Wow.
villain. He played the bad guy in that story in 2006, because
That's
that's when I started to know John all those years ago. And I said, we're doing this play. Will you be in it? So he played the bad guy in 2006 and then became the good guy this year when 2019 it was when I was commissioned to write the Resurrection by him. So that's another little full circle situation there. But to anyone
that's
who wants to get into audio, yeah, do all the fan productions, get involved in all that so that you can demonstrate that you have the talent and the creativity to pull something like that off.
I love that. I love that. I mean, Big Finish started out really doing their own fan dramas and getting so good at it. They
Yeah,
were able to get the license and some incredible authors. I've really enjoyed the audio productions I've been able to be a part of. Applestone Productions. I've been able to play kind of the recurring villain of the series, as
yeah.
you were saying, and that's always fun. And I've gotten to do Suntarans and Time Lords and stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for that. That's really, really fun. So speaking of just the resurrection plant and it coming out and all of this, I was looking at your website, and again, links to your socials and your website will be in the description down below for anybody who's interested. And I got to reading some of your blog posts, and I was looking at a particular blog post about Terrance Dicks and kind of the impact that he had on your life and getting into reading from a young age. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is make a kind of a little gift for you, a bit of artwork.
Oh,
And it's designed based off of the resurrection plant. But in that article, they talk about growing up with Terrance Dicks as a writer and how he really helped to kindle your love of reading. You referred to a book called Stig of the Dump by Clive
yeah,
King, which was, I think, the very first novel you read through, like cover to cover,
yeah,
and you really enjoyed that. So I took that as kind of the cover art as an inspiration for my version of the Resurrection Plant artwork. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you what I've put together for you today. There you go. You should be seeing my secondary screen here
yeah,
with the resurrection plant. And so this is just how I put it together. And I wanted to mimic the original cover.
yeah,
So I used an app called Tune Me to make a more painted look to the finished product. But if you don't know the original cover, Stick of the
yeah,
Dump here,
There it
And
is.
I found Jamie in sort of a crouch position, like you have the caveman, and then
Yeah,
I couldn't get the doctor pointing, but I do have my vision of the creature in the resurrection plant there, and some industrial stuff in the background, and a red tree and stuff. So I
yeah,
hope you like it.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah. Thank you
I
very
had
much.
fun doing that. One of the things I love to hear about are alternate titles to very well-known classic Doctor Who episodes. Did you
Yeah.
have any alternate titles for the Resurrection Plant, or was it one of those that you knew from the start it was going to be called that?
Well, it was originally called The Sanctity of Death. That was the title,
Wow.
first of all. And I submitted it years ago. I can't remember if it's to Virgin New Adventures or BBC Books, but it was a good 20 years plus ago. Um, and it was The Sanctity of Death because in the story, people are worked to death, resurrected back to life, worked to death again, and over and over and over, so that the phrase the sanctity of life has no meaning at all. And that was I thought I was being very clever coming up with that, the sanctity of death. But when I pitched it to John Ainsworth and the producer Michael Stevens, they felt that although it was quite had a poetic ring to it, as far as marketing goes, it doesn't really tell the browsing listener what it is. You know, they wanted something that would grab your attention and then you would want to read what's on the back and then hopefully purchase it. So that was the first change I had to make in the writing process to the title. And I thought, well, I knew when I was going into this right from the start, I would be fully embracing any compromises that were required. And the first one was the title. So although I love the Sanctity of Death title, I changed it to the Resurrection Plant without too much complaining.
Oh, that's awesome. I do like that title as well, as we've seen with the Target novelizations, Doctor Who and the Sanctity of Death, or
Yeah.
Doctor Who and the Resurrection Plant. Do you think that you would ever, like, if the opportunity came up, that you would ever want to um, make a novelization or a book version of the Resurrection Plant?
Yes, I would. I'm obviously, as a Doctor Who fan who's grown up reading the Target books, um, that is one of the big dreams of anyone who's a Doctor Who fan who is creative and who is a writer. Having an audio out is a big dream. Doing a Target book is a big dream. I know recently the TV movie novelization by Gary Russell was reissued with a Target style cover. And
Hmm.
I think he wrote inside, or maybe on Twitter, I can't remember, but it was a kind of, this is a dream come true for me. So even though he's
Yeah,
accomplished all those things, you know, Big Finish and being a script editor on the television series as well, it still gave him a thrill to see that little Target logo on the book. So
absolutely.
for me, what I would like, if they laid it out inside the way the traditional Target books were laid out, where it says, you know, that bit in between the two lines, based on the BBC television serial. So I would like it to be Doctor Who and the Resurrection Plant, and then in the two lines, based on Doctor Who and the Sanctity of Death by Will Hadcroft, by arrangement with BBC Studios, and have it laid out exactly the way the old books were. Whether or not that will ever happen, I don't know. But if Steve Cole or whoever's editing them these days at BBC Books is interested in doing that, I'm certainly up.
You heard it here first, folks. That sounds amazing. I love that. I love that. Those Target novelizations were. Yeah, I remember. I read you saying that you would see Terrance Dick's name on the binding of the Target novelization
Mm,
and say, "I want to see my name there one day."
yeah,
Um, that's
I
very
used to do
exciting.
that a lot. I used to pick up the book and I used to see if it was like, I don't know, Robots of Death, Doctor Who and the Robots of Death, Terrance Dicks, and I would then come up with a story of my own and imagine the title being underneath the logo. And then where Terrance Dick's name is, my name would be there and on the spine and on the inside. And I also used to do it on the TV show when in the 80s when it was Peter Davison and the Sid Sutton title sequence with the stars building up his face and the logo. When it came to the writer name, I used to always imagine it saying by William Hadcroft. the chances of me getting a credit on the television show, well, that's, you know, way up there in the ether somewhere. But my name on a CD, you know, is the next best thing. It really
Right?
is.
And you also got a preview in Doctor Who magazine.
Yeah, that was good, wasn't it?
Yes.
Really whetted the appetite. I really liked the interview with David Rucroft, the sound designer, because I hadn't heard any of it when that preview was published. So I was just as excited to see what it was going to be like as anybody else was. And he really whetted my appetite. And my goodness, when I finally heard it, he really does bring that story to life. It's stunning, the sound design on my story. Very grateful to him the way he's done it.
Were you able to listen to that in advance, or was it the same as the same day it came out, basically?
Yeah, I got it when everybody else did, basically. I kept going onto Amazon and pressing the excerpt button to see if I could get a little clip. And even that didn't come out until the day it was published. So
Yep, yep.
I really didn't hear it until the same day everybody else did.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, you're right. The sound design was really well done on that, and I love when you can hear like particular sound effects that you know are like that's sourced from the TV series. Like
Yeah.
that's legit, and that was really fun.
And
Um,
era specific too. So when you hear the
yes.
sonic
Oh,
screwdriver, it's not the modern one and it's not the one from the 80s. It's the one from 1969. Absolutely spot on.
exactly.
And then there are other sounds that you hear later on, you know them as soon as you hear them, what they are. Yeah.
It's wonderful to have that level of care and just authenticity put into it.
Mm.
We have a question from Who's Books, who asks, "What was your first Doctor Who story?" Which you kind of touched on, that you watched, and who is your favorite Doctor?
Oh, what's the first one I watched?
Yeah.
I have vivid memories of the first Tom Baker season. I can remember I actually had a nightmare that was inspired by the Sontaran experiment. So I would have been 4 thereabouts. I can remember it vividly. I was hiding behind a rock on the moors, and the Sontaran probe was gliding by, and I was absolutely scared to death of it. And I can remember sweating behind this rock in the
Oh my
dream, frightened
gosh.
to death of it. And then years later, when I got the VHS and saw what that probe actually looked like, not very frightening at all, I'm afraid. And
No.
but back, you know, age 4, terrifying. So
That's
that's a very
great.
early memory. Uh, I think I probably started to get really into it, which is the season that begins with the Mask of Mandragora. Is that
That would
14?
be 14. Yep.
Yeah. So I can remember Sarah Jane leaving the TARDIS. I remember that, and
Yep.
I remember being upset for her. I remember when the TARDIS disappears, and then she says, "Oh, he's not even landed in the right place." And I remember being so worried as a 6-year-old. Oh, what if she can't find a way home? If she doesn't know where
Oh,
she is, she's lost. I can remember feeling like that as a young boy. The Robots of Death. I can remember marching around the school playground with my arms outstretched, kill the humans, with a number of other boys.
amazing.
So that was probably the beginnings of me really being aware of it. And then it was cemented in 1979 when Doctor Who Weekly started to be published by Marvel Comics, because I then started to become aware of its history. My parents used to talk about William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, and I had vague memories of John Pertwee. But the idea of other actors playing it besides Tom Baker, um, it never really hit home until Doctor Who Weekly began to be published, and then, of course, the Five Faces of Doctor Who afterwards. And then
Right.
when John Nathan Turner took it over, I was 10 when season 18 began in September 1980. And I remember being absolutely stunned by the change in the titles and the music. And then
Yes.
that made me more aware of how programs are made. Then I started to take an interest in effects and music and all of that. So then I became not just a fan of the Doctor, but of the program as a whole. Then, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, I was gonna say, I totally understand, you know, as a young kid being scared by Doctor Who. So many fans have that experience. I personally found myself scared by the novelization of the Centaurian experiment
Wow.
because it's written by Ian Marter, and
Yeah.
he just goes to the nth degree with making, you know, his description of I believe it's Dyer the Centaurian and the torture that that Sarah Jane goes through, just really graphic. So if you listen to the audiobook or read the novelization, you'll know what I mean. But it's absolutely amazing that you have those wonderful memories.
So
Mark Blake,
how about you, Alex? Sorry to interrupt.
so, no, please,
How
thank
did
you.
you find the show? Because obviously
So
I grew up with it, with something that's on every Saturday, and everybody knew about it. Where you are, that was not the case, was it?
right, right. So I first found out about it. We probably started watching 2007, 2008. And
Right.
so the show had been back, but I don't remember really hearing about that because I was about 10 or 11. And what happened was my dad was on Netflix, and this was back in the days when, yes, you could watch Netflix online, but they had a CD rental situation or a DVD rental situation where you would get them in the mail and then return them. And
Hmm.
so what we did was he watched the new series of Doctor Who. I think there was 1 or 2 seasons on at the time, and thought, I bet the kids would like that. And so he would watch an episode and then watch it with us. And so my first episode had to have been Rose, first of
Yeah.
the new series. And then I remember we watched a couple of series one, but really got into the 10th Doctor, and he really feels like my first Doctor, as you will, and I have some of the earliest memories there. For classic Doctor Who, it was probably one of the stories that was available in their DVD rental system, and so I remember, like, as I would get more into the DVD collecting or the VHS collecting too, um, when you're what we had was we're a family of 5, so we each had a rotation in Netflix. So you would get the DVD, send it back, and then you'd have to wait until 5 other people got through theirs. And so I had a queue in Netflix of like all of the Doctor Who classic stories that they had available, and I would watch those. And so yeah, I remember like the Seeds of Death pretty
Mm.
early on. I used to complain that it was in black and white, and I didn't like
Ah,
it as much as the episodes that were in color. But I've gotten over that now. I enjoy them equally now. But yeah, it was through Netflix, and I'm very sad it's no longer Doctor Who's no longer on Netflix, but you know, it's now been consolidated onto HBO Max and then Classic on BritBox. But I'm just glad that people can find it so easily right now because, you know, back in the days when you were watching, it was very important that you saw Doctor Who when it came out, because there wasn't a way to, like, you know, behind me now I can pick out any episode and watch it whenever, but you know, to miss a Doctor Who episode, you had to catch up by reading the novelizations, you know.
yeah,
So that was a very interesting way to experience Doctor Who. I think you cherished it a lot when you got to see it.
I did. Something else I hit upon doing during the Five Faces season was recording the audio soundtrack on cassette. So I used to get a tape
Oh.
recorder, put it by the speaker of the TV. I did it for An Unearthly Child because I knew this was a special repeat series and we weren't likely to see it again. My mother hadn't seen it since it was originally aired in
Wow.
'63. She was 18, I think, when it aired in '63. So I remember her sitting with me for the first episode of An Unearthly Child because she hadn't seen it since it was very first aired. They never really repeated them, you see. What you would get was the current season through the winter, so September to March, 26 weeks. And then in the summer months, they might repeat 2 or 3 of the stories that had aired most recently, repeat those. But they
I
never
see.
repeated any of the really old stuff or even the John Pertwee stuff. So there was loads of it that I hadn't seen until Five Faces. So I decided I would tape record the soundtrack off the television of the first episode so I could capture it. And I think I might have had the idea of doing that because I had the Genesis of the Daleks LP record.
Mm.
So I knew, you know, what it sounded like as just a soundtrack. I think Warriors Gate had been repeated a little bit later. No, earlier. That's right. So we had Logopolis. Then in the summer months, Warriors Gate was repeated, and I wanted to capture the sound of the TARDIS on tape because I had the Doctor Who sound effects LP record, and
Yeah.
the one noise you want more than anything else is on it. It doesn't have the TARDIS takeoff landing on it. It's got
No.
the doors opening, the scanner screen, the interior ambience, but not the takeoff and landing. So I was sat there trying to capture the sound of the TARDIS materializing and taking off. And also, I wanted the theme music, the Peter Howell theme. And although some months later I would get that as a 7-inch 45 single, I wanted it as it sounded on television. And I can remember towards the end of Warriors Gate, to get the closing theme, I caught a little bit of the dialogue just before the theme came in. So when I played it back, that's when I hit on the idea. I remember it now. That's when I hit on the idea of when I picked up the dialogue just before the cliffhanger scream. I thought, hey, I could record the entire thing. So when they repeated An Unearthly Child in the fall, I recorded the entire thing. I think I taped An Unearthly Child, wasn't too impressed with the Crotons, so I wiped the tape. I tried it with Carnival of Monsters and wasn't that impressed with that either, to be honest. So I wiped that. And then when we got to the Three Doctors, which was the fourth week, I recorded the whole of that and kept it. And then Logopolis, I taped all of that as well because I'd loved it on the original broadcast. And of course, it was a big deal to see Tom Baker leave. So to know it was coming again and I was going to see it again, I wanted to capture it on audio. So that's how fans of my generation used to do it. You would either read the Target book or you would play your home recordings. That's the only way you could re-experience a Doctor Who story that you'd seen on television.
That's incredible. Wow, wow. So it was really such a gift and a special experience to be able to watch them when you did, and then to be able to relive them. And now we're just so lucky to have them on Blu-ray, DVD, VHS, digitally. But I gotta say, I'm grateful to all of those fans who, especially like you did, recorded those because a lot of the missing episodes that we, can't watch now, we have the audio because of thanks to the fans recording it. And
Yeah,
it's just wild that and the people who restore the audio take out the sound of a teacup chinking,
yeah,
in the background because it was a family event, and that was something I actually loved about being able to watch Doctor Who digitally. Is that with our family, everybody had different schedules,
mm,
so we were able to say, okay, we're not going to watch this right when it comes out. We're going to watch it the next day when we can all be together. So we still kept that very much that sense of this is a family event because Doctor Who was one of the shows too that we all enjoyed. It wasn't, we all had varying different tastes in shows, but that was one that we all really enjoyed. So
yeah.
Mark Blaze one over on Twitter has asked, what was it like to write a Doctor Who story, and was there any pressure? So, you know, did you? What was? How long? I want to personally know, like, how long did it take? Were you, because I tend to rush up against deadlines, right? But how was it like for you? What was the process?
Right. Well, the moment I knew it was commissioned, well, I'll just wind back a little bit before that. So the first thing is I get an email from John Ainsworth saying, Michael Stevens wants to try new writers in the range. Would you like to pitch a story idea? So I sent them 3, and one of them was The Sanctity of Death, and that's the one that they went with. So what I did there was just a couple of paragraphs for each idea initially, and then they went with the sanctity of death. Then the next phase is, right, we want you to now write up a two pages of A4 of the entire story, all the characters, what it's about from start to finish. So anyone out there who's thinking or is trying to pitch story ideas to publishers, whether it's Doctor Who or something else, a lot of new or unpublished writers don't, when they do a synopsis, they always leave certain things out because they don't want the publisher to know the whole story, you know. But what they don't realize is that that's seen as amateur. That's the work of an amateur from an editor's point of view. They've not told me everything.
Yeah.
And so what they do is they write an extended blurb, sort of thing that you would have on the back of a book, rather than tell the entire story. So if anyone's pitching to editors and editors want a synopsis or a treatment, you must describe the entire story, you know, briefly, but you must have it from beginning to end. So I did that. And then I thought, and I wasn't asked to do this, but I thought what I would do is I would write up one of the scenes to demonstrate how I write prose and the flavor and the tone of the story. So the penultimate scene, which I know you've heard the thing from beginning to end, Alex. So if I say the penultimate scene where they're in the office, the Doctor and Foreman Wren, that scene is the first scene that I wrote. And I attached it with the synopsis so they could see the flavour of the story, the way I write the Doctor's dialogue, and the tension in that scene is kind of the whole point of the entire story. So that's what clinched it, I think. So then I got a message back from John saying, yes, we would like to commission this. So then, you gulp, take a sharp intake of breath, you think, right, now I have to write this. It's a sort of feeling of a mixture of excitement and dread, really. But the excitement wins, because you think, well, I've got the synopsis, I know what the story is. So, and I think it was 10,000 words, I think, which isn't a lot. You think an hour-long story would be thousands and thousands of words. So I overwrote it. I think I wrote something like 30,000 words. Loads of detail. And then I had to hack 20,000 words out somehow. And then even when we got it down to about 15, it was going back between John and myself. We were plucking more out and straightening things out and tidying things up until we got it down to about 10,000. So it was 5 drafts it went through before it was right. I know that if I do any more, I'm not going to be writing 30,000 words. It will be. Yes. It is going to be 10,000, and we're not going to be going through so many to get it right. It's a steep learning curve, you see. But once you've learned it, you know it. Second time round, if there is a second time round, I'll know what I'm doing, and I won't be making those amateurish mistakes. So I didn't feel, apart from the word count, I didn't feel under pressure particularly. I enjoyed what I was doing, just knowing that your editor and your producer like the idea, and they like the whole concept of the thing. That gives you confidence then to turn out your best work. And obviously, if it's your very first one, as it was for me, that's all very exciting. I didn't need anyone to stimulate me. I was straight in there and on it. And every time they wanted changes, I recalled all the interviews with all the script editors and writers down through the years who all talk about compromise and how certain things that they really loved had to go for the sake of the story. So I knew it would be like that before I started, and I embraced it. So there were 1 or 2 bits that I had to cut that I didn't want to, but I just went ahead and did it. The title, for example, I didn't really want to change it from the sanctity of death, but I just went ahead and changed it. And there's one bit, I can't really describe it without giving a key part of the story away, but there's one aspect of, shall we say, how they are resurrected. and how they come back in the resurrection plans. I had them coming back as exact copies of what they were when they died, but without the wounds. Well, John suggested to me, because of the technology being used to resurrect them, he suggested, why don't we have them come back a different way, given that the technology is from a particular place? So that was his suggestion, and it worked so well because I was able to play around with that throughout the story, and
That's
put a couple of jokes in along the way as well.
yeah, that was really fun. And it made it feel like you're saying a more authentic to the extended universe, and like you're saying where that technology came from. I appreciated some of the references that you put in, and in particular there's one too that I had to, when I heard it I was like, oh, I think that's a reference, and I had to go to the TARDIS Wikia just to type it in, but it's a reference to particular Sixth Doctor story.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spoil it, but I just want to let you know that I got that reference now, and I love that. And that was a great little thing to put in. Was that because you liked that story? Was that your idea to put it in there?
Yes, it was my idea. I am a big fan of the Sixth Doctor. I was 13 and three quarters when Caves of Androzani was broadcast. And I was, yeah, so that was March '84, Caves of Androzani, and the Twin Dilemma followed it at the end of that season. And then the scheduling, let me think. No, it still was January to March, wasn't it? That's right, because in Davison's era, it was shown twice weekly. So rather than September to March, it was now January to March. And then with Colin's first full season, it wasn't 2 episodes a week, it was 1 45-minute episode. So it was still January to
Right.
March, yeah. So Attack of the Cybermen was January '85. So I turned 15 in May '85. So by the time Trial of a Time Lord was broadcast in '86, September, I was 16. So Tom Baker was the doctor of my entire primary school life from age 5 to 11. And Colin Baker was the doctor of my teens, really. I appreciated Peter Davison, but Colin Baker really was my hero. I was going through I didn't really fit, and I don't think anybody watching this is going to find that surprising. If you're a geek and a nerd, you know what I mean. At school, it's just, I didn't fit. They were all going one way, I was going the other. That's how it felt. They were all
Mhm.
very obsessed with football and sports. I had zero interest in that and was very obsessed with science fiction. And now I realize, really on the autism spectrum. So when Colin turned up as the doctor, as soon as he sat up at the end of Androzani and said, "Change my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon," and it seems not a moment too soon, the way he delivers the line, as soon as the theme tune came crashing in, I thought, oh, this is more like it. This
Uh-huh.
is the Doctor, an alien, someone who is not beyond reach, but he's not easy to reach. He's disconnected slightly. He's a little bit
Mm.
prickly, and I liked him straight away. And I loved all of season 22. And I've been enjoying it again recently with the Blu-ray release. Even Time Lash, folks. I had a soft spot for Time Lash, and the Trial of a Time Lord, of course, the following year. So that particular region of space that gets mentioned in my story, yeah, is a nod to that. But I also, in the story, I also wanted to indicate that the planetoid Helico 3 is in a region of space where the inhabitants shouldn't know about that place referenced in Trial of a Time Lord. So how do they know? And then that obviously feeds into what's really going on, and where some of these people are from.
Dun, dun, dun. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Um, that's really, really cool. So, uh, random question, but I want to play a little bit of a game right now. Do you like crosswords?
I'm not very good at them, so go ahead.
I 100% agree with you. I love a crossword when I know the answer, and so that's why I like Doctor Who magazine's crosswords.
Right.
Because not that I know the answer all the time, but I have half a chance. Whereas with normal crosswords, it's like I don't get that reference. So what I've done is I've made a crossword based off of words and phrases in the resurrection plant, and
Oh,
so
right.
I think I've made it easy enough that it'll be fun, but also hopefully there might be some ones there that you kind of have to piece together. But we'll work through it together.
All right.
And thankfully there are crossword puzzle makers online, so I didn't have to figure it all out on my own. So I'll just get that up. The hints are all my own though, so we'll start off with one that you're sure to know. Let's see here.
Well, I think I know one across.
One across, yes.
Let me just see.
The hint is
Yeah, his face was it craggy and lifted?
yes. Yep. I loved that expression, the way that you would somehow just choose certain words and that image just craggy and lived
Yeah.
in. I love that. That was amazing.
Yeah,
You knew
that
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 in an
might have
audiobook.
been how Terrance Dicks described him. I'm not sure. I may have subconsciously stolen that because the phrase just came to me. His face was craggy and lived in.
Absolutely. Some of the descriptions of the Doctor that you see in the novelizations are just so amazing like that. I
Okay.
put author of the Android book series for Seven Across. So I think you might know that one. It's
Right. So I'm taking it's just the surname.
yes,
So that's
correct.
Hadcroft, surprisingly.
There. Surprisingly. And then so we've got those.
Four across is industrial.
Yes, indeed.
Right. Eight. Let me think. It's not so much a fault as an I know the scene that is coming from. Not so much a fault as it's to do with the computer.
We
I'll
can
pass on. I'll pass
we
on
can
that for now.
I love that part, and I think you'll get it with some other words here.
Yeah.
This one, 11 across, Jamie was sent to work here.
Foundry.
Yep, yep. And then we've got this person
Oh
had
yeah.
a somewhat blank
Yeah.
facial expression.
Yeah. Blank being the word. Vacant.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. I love the way Frazer read that too.
yes.
He
Oh
seemed to
my
put a
gosh.
certain amount of emphasis on the word. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I love it. I love it. Speaking of things people love, 14 across is Zoe loves these.
Computers.
Absolutely. Computers. Well, computer, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I made that singular. So this 15 across is the last name of the actor who played the second Doctor.
Mr. Troughton.
Troughton, indeed. And then let's go into down. So another word for returning from the dead.
Resurrection.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll do 6 down just because that'll give you another
Yeah. Go on
letter.
then.
This is Jamie's nickname for the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah. A wand. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then we also have the first, that's also 9 down. So we've got magic wand.
All right. Yeah.
So that gives you 3 letters there. And it's not so much a fault as
So improvement.
oh, that would work. Impediment.
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 Of course. Yeah. Impediment.
10 down, there were abnormally high levels of this on Calico 3.
Fatalities. Well, that's not it, is it? No.
And that's a good guess, though. Good guess. Something that's also a problem for us here on Earth as well with
let me just say
it's a
pollution.
result of the yes,
Pollution.
yes,
Yeah. Helps if you actually
absolutely.
read it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, again, I think you're doing great considering this is not put together by a crossword puzzle. And then we have a person who exercises the ruling power. This is
Regent.
absolutely regent.
It's a good job I know this story.
Exactly. We're testing you. We're really testing you. Some fish like to live in this.
Some fish like to live in this.
It's also the name of one of the characters. Part of the family.
Coral.
Coral, exactly. There you go. You've done it. Well done. Well done.
Yay.
Thank you for doing
I
that.
only got a couple wrong.
Yeah. Well, and then
I enjoyed
it
that.
was put together last minute, so I'll take responsibility for some of the vague hints. But yeah, that was really fun. Thank you for doing that with me. We also have a question from Louis Frisbee. Actually, has a couple questions. First one though is, what is your favorite classic Doctor Who story?
My favorite story from the classic era. Well, let's see. That's a very, very hard question to answer, of course, because I have many favorites. I mean, in the Hartnell era, it would have to be the Daleks,
Ooh.
Troughton, the Invasion, John Pertwee, a number there. The Day of the Daleks, especially the spruced up special edition with all the new effects and everything. The Green Death, we'll get into Tom Baker, and you've got Genesis of the Daleks, of course, but so many others like Pyramids of Mars, and
that's a good one.
The Deadly Assassin, the Robots of Death, the Talons of Wen Chiang, City of Death.
I love robots. And
then into the Peter Davison era, Earthshock, The Visitation, The Five Doctors. And then, of course, in Colin Baker's time, we have Revelation of the Daleks, Sylvester McCoy, The Curse of Fenric.
Good choice.
So hard to choose a favorite from the whole 26 years of the original run. But I'm going to go for Logopolis, Tom Baker's finale. I am aware that script-wise, it's not the most coherent story ever told. There are lots of great ideas in it, and they're presented well, but not really explained who or what the Watcher was. That one line, "He was the Doctor all the time," doesn't really explain it within the story itself. We've got all the theories and discussions with Christopher H. Bidmead since, but within the story itself, it's ambiguous. Although I do like all that stuff with the Watcher. Again, the ideas and the way they are presented. How does measuring a police box on Earth in all its dimensions and superimposing or overlaying those dimensions on the TARDIS repair the chameleon circuit? Is it that by overlaying the dimensions, it sort of shakes it free of that shape? I don't know, because I don't understand block transfer computation either. But in spite of saying all of that, I do like the big concepts. I like the ideas, the TARDIS within a TARDIS within a TARDIS. I like the idea of the relationship between matter and energy and mathematics, and that it's the mathematics that's holding it all together. And the idea of in a closed system like the universe, entropy would just build and build and build and build until the whole thing collapsed. And particularly the idea, the monitor says that the universe long ago passed the point of total collapse. So what has been keeping it going then? Well, it's all these gateways into other dimensions and other universes that that the Logopolitans, through their mathematics and their equations, have kept going. So although again didn't, at age 10 didn't really get what that meant in any kind of detail, but I got the essence of it, and I
Mm.
got the idea that was being presented. Yeah, that the universe should have collapsed long ago, and it hadn't because of the Logopolitans. So I did appreciate all of that back then, and I appreciate it even more now. Some big concepts being presented in that, but
Yeah.
also with the story, with the television program, you have the way it was shot and directed by Peter Grimwade. You have Paddy Kingsland's wonderful, wonderful funereal incidental music.
That's
I liked all the actors, all the performances. The characters are good. And all the stuff sort of leading up to the regeneration, particularly in that last episode there with the radio telescope. And now we have that special edition as well, where they've put in the actual radio telescope from Jodrell Bank, standing in as the Pharos project. And when the Doctor is on the gantry, in the background, you've got those extra girders and things that make it look like a real telescope. And the effect where you see him literally drop through the girders at the end. Yeah, I love all that. So I've always loved Logopolis. I loved it when it was first transmitted. I tape recorded it with my cassette recorder, play a record, click, when it was repeated as part of the Five Faces season,
right.
and played that tape to death until the VHSs came out, and the DVDs, and now the Blu-ray. And it's a story that I keep going back to, and that's why I have to list that. If I have to choose an all-time favorite, I list Logopolis as the all-time favorite, because it's one that I keep going back to.
That's amazing. Yeah, Logopolis is definitely one of those stories that's grown on me. I think my favorite memory of watching Logopolis was when the season 18 Blu-ray came out. A local theater was showing Logopolis as part of that promotion of that box set, and so I got to see it in theaters with my family. It was amazing, and it was absolutely a story that once I saw it like that, it just absolutely became much higher up on my favorites list. And it really is incredible, like you're saying, with those updated effects as well as the music. And I just love the moment when Adric and the Doctor are preparing to flood the TARDIS. And again, lots of things that just make you go, this doesn't make sense, but it really has a lot going for it despite that. And so I'm so glad that you were able to just watch it a bunch and go back and back to it. I think that is a great sign of a story that can be your own personal favorite. So thank you so much. Next up is, of course, now we've gone over the classic series. What's your favorite new series, a Doctor Who story? Lewis Frisbee wants to know.
Again, I run into the same problem, that there are so many
There are.
that are really good
Yeah.
and well worth watching multiple times. You get something new out of these stories each time you watch them, don't you?
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
was just thinking of, well, with Christopher Eccleston, it has to be The Empty Child, I think.
That's a good one.
That's an all-time favorite, yeah. David Tennant, again, there are so many. I mean, The Girl in the Fireplace,
Yes.
Blink.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so many in the David Tennant era.
Definitely.
Then Matt Smith. I quite like Matt Smith's first season as a whole.
Yeah.
But I like is it The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone, or is it Flesh and Stone and The Time of
the
Angels?
Angels.
I get the titles mixed
Yeah.
up. But that big two-part
Yeah.
story where the Weeping Angels make their first
Yeah.
comeback,
Time of the Angels, then Flesh and Stone.
as does River Song. Yeah. Oh, The Silence in the Library. Yeah, there's
That's
another
a good one. That's a good one.
So that's for Matt Smith, and of course, The Day of the Doctor. How can I not mention
Yeah.
that. What a wonderful celebration story that
So much fun.
um, yeah, that's well worth revisiting several times over. Um, and then with Peter Capaldi, it's got to be Flatline, really. I
Mhm.
watched that again recently and thought, that is such a great story.
Oh,
But if I had to choose one out of the whole of the modern series, I'm going to have to say, and it's on the same basis as Logopolis, really, that it's not the most watertight plot,
right.
um, but it has so much going for it emotionally, and it's the one that I go back to the most, and it is The End of Time.
Oh,
Um,
that's a good one.
actually, I'm not sure now. Is it The End of Time, or is it The Parting of the Ways?
Oh,
It's a tough one. As that last one with Eccleston and the Daleks and the dilemma of does he push the plunger and wipe out future Earth to stop the Daleks? And then he can't
right.
because he just doesn't have it in him
Mm,
to do such a thing.
yeah.
And then sacrificing his ninth life to save Rose. Um, that's one I go back to a lot.
Hmm.
And then The End of Time again. You know, you've got um, you've got the Doctor versus the Master, and all of that,
Yeah.
haven't you?
Yeah.
Um, you think about the return of Gallifrey.
Yeah.
He will knock 4 times,
Timothy Dalton.
and all the stuff leading up to the regeneration, and that wonderful scene where the Master finally realizes that he's been played
Yeah.
by Rassilon and the Time Lord High
Right.
Council, and he blasts them back into their pocket universe. Wonderful stuff. And then that's the final moments leading up to the regeneration itself,
Yeah.
and the arrival of Matt Smith. Yeah, that's maybe I should choose sort of have a joint favourite
Yeah.
there: the Parting of the Ways and The End of
You
Time,
can do that. That's
um,
great.
because I go back to those fairly regularly, probably more than any of the other modern Doctor Who's. Although, as I say, I do have many favourites from 2005 up until the present day.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, two great choices. And I'd love to just in finales, I think everybody in the crew and especially with the writing just kind of steps up your game and the stakes are higher and you can do more emotional things. If somebody signed on for a contract or isn't signed on for the next contract, you can really do some emotional damage in those scripts. And so I think those are two great picks, and you can absolutely do a joint answer. I think that's a really some good picks there. So thank you so much. There's one final question from Louis Frisbee, which is if you could pick a historical event to go to, what would it be, where would it be, and why?
I'm going to say John Logie Baird's invention of television. When you
Oh,
think about it, all these shows that we love, um, these cult series, none of them would exist as television programs if there was no television. And
yeah,
also, just to think about, if you could go back to that point where John Logie Baird um, put together the first television set in its very crude and simple uh, style, because it was basically like I believe the very first one was so crude. It was just like a slideshow in a way, but lots of slides so that the
mhm,
figures moved, a bit like shadow play, I
right,
suppose, but done through lenses and a projector and so forth. And then the idea of electronically transmitting an image from a camera to a receiver. And the moment he did that and saw, a face at the other end on a screen, that must have been absolutely staggering to realize he'd done it and what it would
yeah,
mean further down the line. I think, was it in 1923? He conducted his first experiments with an actual television set that he'd created. And then later on presented his invention to the Radio Times to demonstrate how it would work as something that could be rolled out across the country in time. Amazing, isn't it? It would be
Yeah.
amazing to go back and see him react
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
face on a screen,
That
transmitted
would be.
from a camera to a screen for the very first time. Yeah, so that's where I would go. If I had to go back to a famous event in history.
That's
On
great.
a personal level, though,
Yeah,
I know this isn't really answering your question, but
that's okay.
on a personal level, what I'd really like to do, this is a bit like Back to the Future, I suppose, but what I'd really like to do is go back in time at a point where my mother and father were in their 30s or early 40s or whatever. 30s, yeah, we'll say 30s. And my grandparents would have been kind of in their, I don't know, 60s or something. And
Mhm.
just basically go back in time as me as I am now and meet my parents and my grandparents and get to know
Oh,
them as adults, you know,
yeah.
not as me being their son or grandson, but as
Uh-huh.
a man in his early 50s. Obviously, they wouldn't know who I was.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
might think that I look like I'm related to maybe I'm a long distance cousin or something, but they're not going to
yeah.
think I'm little William, are they? You know.
No.
So it would be great to meet them, knowing that they don't know who I am, and just find out what really makes them tick and who they really are. Because a child always gets a carefully presented and to some degree filtered version of their parents or grandparents, don't they? They don't
Yeah.
have the relationship with them that their fellow adults have. So I
Mhm.
would like to do that on a personal level, go back in time and meet my parents and my grandparents and know them as an adult.
Wow. Wow, that's an amazing answer, and I'm so glad you brought that up. That is really powerful, and I think that in a way, being able to, Doctor Who has provided a sort of a form of time travel in that if you watched it, with your family, you could have this multi-generational touchstone that you can now, rewatch an episode that was maybe your parents' favorite or something that you remember watching with your grandparents, and it can, for a moment, make you feel like you're closer to them again. And I think that's been something that I've really enjoyed, is that Doctor Who's always been a show that my entire family loved to watch, and so we'll always have those memories associated with being together and watching Doctor Who. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's really great. Just a heads up, this next part of the interview does contain spoilers for the Resurrection Plant. So if you haven't yet listened to the Resurrection Plant, make sure you pause this video, check out the description down below for links to where you can get it, listen to it, and come back. All right. So assuming you've just done that, let's get back into the interview. Again, really
Oh,
enjoyed your story. So cool to
this
have you on here.
this is the sound effects LP
Look
from
at
nine.
that.
I'll tell you a story about this in a minute, but
Please
let
do.
me find it. Track 16. Just in case you don't know what this is a sound effects LP record. So it's got on side one 8 ambiences and planetary atmosphere type noises, and on side two there's 22 very, very short tracks of TARDIS interior noises, gun noises, and all the rest of it. And the track, let me find it. I'm going to see it there. This is very tatty because it's very old. But after Gallifreyan Staser.
Oh, yes.
And it,
Yes.
and it says Gallifreyan Staser, 3 blasts. Now, in the story, when the Doctor hears the Gallifreyan Staser going off, there are 3 blasts. And he actually says it, 3 blasts. And I just put that in as a little nod to anyone who has the sound effects record and played it to death like I did back in the day.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so
An
special. I
exclusive.
love that.
But
Yes,
the,
an
but the
exclusive.
I mean, it means nothing really. It doesn't make any difference to the story one way or another. But so I put it in. I wondered if my editor John might have recognised what I was doing there, but I don't think he did. So I got away with it. But
Nice.
this, I won it in a competition. This is
Whoa.
1980. I was age 10. Doctor Who Weekly, and let me find it. The competition was called Call the Shots. There you go. So they were giving away 100 copies of the Doctor Who sound effects record.
Whoa.
The idea was that you have a comic strip with a laser beam in the comic strip, and there's normally a word above the beam to describe the noise. So the idea was that you had to come up with the word, and I couldn't think of a word, so I asked my mum. And my mum said, "What about Zwisk?" So that's ZWEEEEESK exclamation mark. So I put that on a card, sent it in, and let me find it. There you go. This is, see if you can see it. William Hadcroft.
Gosh, yes.
So I lived in Greater Manchester at that time. So this is really the beginnings of me wanting to be a writer, because it's the first time I ever saw my name in a magazine or in print anywhere outside of a school document. So yeah, that's a prized possession, that sound effects record, which is why I felt I had to put a reference to it in the Resurrection Plant. Because again, it's another full circle situation. To age 10, to have my name in print in Doctor Who Weekly, and then decades later, I've got my name on the front of an audio.
That's incredible. Well, I love that. That's really, really fun. And it's thanks to things like that we have, really dedicated fans who learn to love writing and reading because of Doctor Who. And now we're getting to enjoy these new stories thanks to fans like you. So, oh my gosh, I've had a blast. I don't want this to end. It's been really, really fun. And I have one last kind of question for you,
Sure.
which is based on your love of Terrance Dicks. We've had the Essential Terrance Dicks. This is volume 2. If you could pick 5 novelizations that Terrance Dicks wrote for an imaginary volume 3, kind of choose those ones. What ones would you pick that you would like to see? And it doesn't have to be because you think they're the greatest, but like ones that personally you enjoyed. And I do have a list if you want of, I've got a spreadsheet up with the stories that
Well, I can think of a few. I don't know if they're in the volume already published. That's the trouble.
I'll let you know.
I'll give you Doctor Who and the Deadly Assassin. I was very much drawn in by that, and because I'd seen Keeper of Track and I knew about the Burned Out Master, but I couldn't remember the Peter Pratt one. I was 6 when Deadly Assassin was broadcast, so I couldn't remember it. And it may even have been possible that my mother didn't allow me to watch it because there was a lot of negative publicity about the violence at the time. So I wanted to see how the Burned Out Master came into it prior to Keeper of Track, and so I had to read Doctor Who and the Deadly Assassin. What else? Doctor Who, the Planet of the Daleks. Did he do that one? I think he did.
Yes, he did. That would be a great one.
That's one of those stories where you read it and go, "This is brilliant," and then the VHS comes out. The VHS comes out. Oh dear, maybe not. But the story idea is brilliant. That's why they're novelists.
Absolutely.
It's just that the production values let it down. Doctor Who and the Dalek Invasion of Earth. I was quite struck by that.
That was in the first volume.
Okay,
that was a good one.
The Three Doctors.
That was an incredible one.
Now I watched I had seen the Three Doctors in the Five Faces season, and wanted to re-experience it, even though I had the tape recordings. So I got the book. And the volume of the version, or the printing, I should say, of that book, the title was Doctor Who and the Three Doctors, which always tickled me. They later amended it to just the Three Doctors, but because they always put Doctor Who and in all the
Right.
titles, when it came to that one, they still called it Doctor Who and the Three Doctors.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, I have that actually. Yeah, you can see that
That's
here.
that's the one. Yeah, that's the edition. Yeah, Doctor Who and the Three Doctors. Wonderful.
So you're expecting four.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed that book.
I'm surprised it didn't actually make the cut for the top 10 um, fan rated ones. That's a really good choice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the others.
So actually,
See, for me, a lot of it was being excited to see them because I remembered the programs on television. So they
right.
might not always be the best written. I was extremely excited to see Doctor Who and the Keeper of Traken in my school bookshop, and because I'd only seen it a few months before on television, when it came out as a book, I I can remember uh, desperately wanting it as soon as I saw it in the school bookshop. So some of the story, some of his novelizations might not be his best, but they have a place in my heart because of what they meant to me at the time.
Exactly, exactly. I know the Robots of Death. I
Mm,
would have loved to see one of these volumes.
mm,
I love that story, and I've been this past year getting into the audiobook readings of the Target novelizations, and I've been floored by some of them in how much they add to the stories, how engaging they are, and it feels like you're watching kind of an extended edition, right, of the
yeah,
story, and um, it can absolutely take a story that you maybe didn't like on TV because it was rushed or didn't have the best, the fullest budget, and turn it into something that's really, really incredible. I mean, the
mm,
way that some of these seasons were made, I think especially when Philip Hinchcliffe took over, is he would budget it out so that a certain story was all in studio, so that he would have a bigger budget for another story, have more
mm,
filming days on location. And so when you look at these stories, and we can sometimes arbitrarily say, oh, well, this one's so good and this one isn't good. But in order for that one to be good, this one had to kind of be bad, or to, because
mm,
this one had less this one story took up more rehearsal time. This one story had less rehearsal time. So
yeah,
I see you kind of have to look at it as a season as a whole and
mm,
say, well, thank you to these stories that kind of sacrificed to make
mm.
this story really, really good.
Have you read Glenn McCoy's novelization of Time Lash or heard the reading?
I listened to the
Um,
audiobook recently.
yeah,
It came
me
out in
too.
March. Yeah,
It's so different, isn't it?
wildly,
The whole
wildly
the
different.
whole style and tone of it, and all the stuff that Glenn McCoy has added, and the way he's explained things and added things out. It's the same story, but it feels very different than the
Absolutely.
broadcast version. Also, just I know we're sort of talking about Terrance Dicks, but two that really made a massive impact on me that were not written by Terrance Dicks are Doctor Who and the Daleks by David Whitaker,
Oh my
written
gosh, yes.
written in the first person from Ian Chesterton's viewpoint. Wonderful. And Doctor Who and the Cave Monsters by Malcolm Holt, which is the Silurian.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh my
I,
gosh.
I can remember reading the Silurians and thinking, I want to read, I want to write like this, in my early teens. And I noted the way he did it and the way every time the scene changed, he wrote from a different character's viewpoint and added more to it, like the perspective of the Silurian character, for example, which you just
Hmm.
cannot get on television. But in the book, you read his thoughts, you know what he's thinking about things. You get a little prequel about the prehistoric
Yes.
world where they all came from. Um, so there's a bit of backstory to why they feel the way they do about the Earth. And then the killer ending with the brigadier ordering, Geneva ordering the planes to come over and bomb them back into hibernation or to
Oh,
death,
I know.
depending
Yeah.
on which way you think it went. absolutely gutted. I was just in my early teens, and I'd never seen it on television. I didn't remember it, and the VHS was some years away. So
Yeah,
that book by Malcolm Hulke had a huge impact on me, yeah, and deserves a mention.
absolutely. It absolutely does. I love the audiobook reading of that, and
Mm,
like being able to see some characters really get fleshed out in their points of view, whether it's, the head scientist and his, relationship,
mm,
um, and just like you're saying, that prequel that's just heartbreaking when you're like, no, it's not going to crash into Earth. You don't need to go into hibernation and all this stuff, and how they kind of viewed the humans as pets, and
mm,
the
mm,
ending, of course, when the Brigadier's not telling the Doctor something, and he kind of guesses but kind of not, and
mm,
yeah, absolutely. And then Doctor Who and the Daleks is, I love that novelization, and
mm.
we've recently got news of a graphic novel of that,
Yeah.
novelized using the novelization coming out, and I cannot wait for that because it is, as you say, such a good one. And what I like about certain novelizations is that they would catch up the reader in a particular way. So, like Doctor Who and the Daleks has an alternate beginning that stitches together the first kind of episode of An Unearthly Child with the Daleks, and has like a
Mm,
different alternate beginning that's really captivating and skips
mm.
over the caveman stuff, which I'm not too sad to see go.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was thinking as well, Doctor Who and the Auton invasion begins with the final moments of the war games, doesn't it? So instead of you just going
Yeah.
into the Doctor's arrived and he has a different face and Brigadier not being sure it's really him, the reader gets to experience the back end of the war games and see Patrick Troughton be exiled,
Yes.
so that you know where it's coming from and why the Brigadier isn't certain, and why the Doctor doesn't know who he is for a while. Doesn't know who he himself is for a while as he recovers from the transformation. So that's a wonderful little bit of a bit of a prequel there. So that everybody. Well, let me see. When did that come out? In 1973 or something like that. So there would be readers there who wouldn't remember the war games. Older readers would,
Right. Right.
but for younger readers, they wouldn't know anything about a Doctor prior to John Pertwee. So
No.
that was a great
No.
way of doing it, a great way of explaining it. Mm.
Yes, and of course the intro of the changing face of Doctor Who
Yeah,
always caught you up on the different ones, because like you're saying, if you were, like you did, grew up with, Tom Baker for 7 years, he was Doctor Who, he was what you knew, and we don't talk about it as much, but John Pertwee was the Doctor for 5 full seasons. I mean, that's
yeah.
pretty close to Tom Baker's record.
Mm,
It's 2 seasons short, and so he also felt like the Doctor for a long time for a lot of
mm.
people. So it's very, very special that way. And yeah, the novelization is amazing. And we know now that there's a 30,000 word draft of the Resurrection Plant that, should it ever be novelized, can expand and give us an
It's on
extended
my
edition.
laptop, folks.
It's ready to go. I want a copy of that.
Okay.
That would be amazing.
Unless Steve Cole reads it and goes, "Oh, no, get rid of all this," and
Yes,
I
yes.
have to do it again.
Yes, start from scratch. Start from scratch. Well, oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining me. The Resurrection Plant is available to purchase on CD and digital download, and we are, of course, doing a giveaway of a signed CD. Link to that is in the description down below. Thank you so much, Will, for making that happen, for writing this
My
great
pleasure.
story, and for joining me today. It's been an absolute blast.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Bye. Thanks again so much for watching. Thank you so much to Will Hadcroft for really going the extra mile to make this interview a success. It was so much fun. So thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, keep growing your knowledge collection and connection with other Doctor Who fans. Albert the Adipose says hello, and we both hope to see you in the next video. Bye.